"Don't you dare tell nobody," Daddy said after he killed Mama. He was so close I could feel his breath against the covers pulled over my head. I was too scared to move, even if the thought had popped in my head to run out to find somebody to tell. I'd heard them fighting again, and I'd wished for a moment I could have been back with the Millers, my foster folks, even though Mr. Miller looked at me funny all the time and Mrs. Miller smelled like prunes. But all I had was Daddy now, and I suppose the dead girl they kept in the spare bedroom. I felt Daddy rise off the edge of my bed and leave. The air was just a tad cooler after he was gone. I couldn't see the kitty clock on the wall to read the time without my glasses, but it was forever before I went to sleep, each time creeping to the edge and pulling back awake. The next morning at the table, I could tell Daddy hadn't slept either. He kept blinking and wiping at his eyes. I think over stale breakfast cereal, it really hit him that Mama was completely gone. Not just visiting grandmother for the week or playing cards with some of her waitress friends overnight, but all the way gone. He looked confused, shooting his eyes over his shoulder every couple minutes like she was about to walk into the kitchen, and he twice opened his mouth, half looking at me like he wanted to say something. Finally, he got up and popped his head in the fridge. I looked over at Katie and she was just sitting at the table. I didn't like her. She stared too much, and whenever she wasn't staring at me, she was staring at something else. She smelled too. Not dead like the cat I found one summer that got caught in our backyard fence and died, but like medicine and chemicals. The lady from Children's Services said she was supposed to smell that way because of what they had treated her with. Mama and Daddy weren't supposed to be able to foster no more children, but when the state had started taking in dead people all of a sudden, Mama and Daddy could again. The only way I was gonna see my foster brother Rick again was if he died and came back too. I guess the dead don't count as much. Daddy tried knocking around over the stove with a couple eggs and a freezer bag full of bacon, but he didn't even know how to turn the ice on. I only got up from the table when I smelled the gas to turn the stove back off. He slammed the pans down and came over, jabbing a finger in my face. "Little boy," he said, "I ain't the maid. Get your own dang breakfast and get going." I poured myself a bowl of that stale, sugarless cereal, but one whiff of the milk when I took the cap off told me it had gone bad. I looked over at Katie, wondering how I was going to ask Daddy about school. She was staring at the basement door and hadn't touched her bowl. Mama would usually take me when I could wake her up. "Are you gonna drop us off?" "What?" Daddy shouted. His voice was really loud. He had that look in his eye again, like he was ready to start hitting. I stood up and took Katie by the hand, pulling her out of the chair and away from the basement door. Daddy shook his shoulders like something had crawled up his back and into his hair, and he walked out the kitchen. He didn't like touching anything she touched, and to be honest, it was the only time I could stand to touch her. I hadn't heard him leave, but I was sure he was gone. We walked down the hall hand in hand past Mama and Daddy's open bedroom door. I left her outside and went in when I saw Mama's purse on the dresser. She always came home with tip money, and sometimes she would give me a couple dollars to buy a lunch. I fished inside and pulled out a fistful of crumpled bills. Before I could stuff them in my pocket, tears I hadn't expected welled up, and I started sobbing. It wasn't that I was gonna miss her. She made for an awful mother, in some ways worse than Daddy. They fought all the time, and he didn't always win. One morning, all he said was, "I don't see how you can expect me to take you seriously." and Mama just swatted him upside the head with a hot frying pan full of sizzling. I cried because the money in her purse was the last of anything I would have of hers. The toilet flushed and I stood up and ran out of the room. I grabbed her hand just as Daddy was coming out. He didn't say anything, only pushed past us and into their room. He snatched up Mama's purse, dug through it, and tossed it aside. "Figures," he said. He threw on his cap, and as he was walking out the house he shouted, "Stay out the basement!" That wasn't a problem. I was scared of it. It wasn't even a real basement. The ceiling was so low I had to duck and the floor was all exposed brick. Once I'd poked myself on a nail down there and had to get a tetanus shot. We took a cab to school. My first thought was to skip, but that wouldn't work. Attendance was mandatory for her kind, no exceptions. They didn't get sick, vacations had to be approved, and the state scheduled doctor's visits. If they took her away, then it would only be me and him. That afternoon I ate tacos while we walked home. The lady from Children's Services had told us some about where she came from. Her parents had died in a pocket outbreak 9 months before 2 counties over. They'd taken her in for something called reconditioning and told us she could never attack a living human being. The lady never told us if she was the one who'd killed her parents, but I had my suspicions. When she'd brought her, Daddy had made sure to put on his 4 special clothes, same ones as when he'd come to report his progress to the court before they made me go back home. He'd slicked back his hair and managed to shave a few hours off his 5 o'clock shadow. The lady had talked a whole lot, and Daddy had nodded a whole lot, saying yes to everything she'd said. Mama was at the bar working when they brought Katie, but he promised to relay all the lady had told him. Katie'd got the room Mama and Daddy had fixed up for the baby girl they'd stopped trying for years before. They'd gotten a check every month after she'd come to stay with us. Not that they needed to do much. New clothes every now and then, but that was about it. She didn't eat, but they'd bought her own bowl, plate, utensils, and a cup. With every meal she was supposed to sit with us while we ate, with either her bowl or plate, and silverware set out, and wood pieces shaped like little pieces of food. The lady had called it part of the resocialization process, as if she would ever start talking or get married or have any kids of her own. All these arrears, Daddy had said after the lady was gone. Well, I got one too. Don't say it, Mama had said, slapping his chest. But they'd been good to her for a little while, at least while they were a tiny bit afraid. But she really didn't try to eat us. It was kinda nice 'cause they left me alone too. She would sit still and let Mama brush her hair. They gave Mama a special brush and told her not too much or her hair could come out. Sit quiet while we watched wrestling, and sit quiet at night while we slept. She did a lot of sitting. I realized sometime before waking up that morning I'd stopped exactly believing what Daddy had done. Mama had spent all night somewhere else before. Nobody ever told me where or why, but after a few days she usually came back. Maybe Daddy had only wanted to do it. Maybe he said it because he wanted me to think it, even for just a moment. Maybe it was just a weird roundabout way for him to try to hurt her feelings. But when we got home, I believed again. It was the smell, like that dead cat, but a lot stronger. We didn't have air conditioning and we had to keep all the windows shut because it wasn't safe where we lived. I locked the door, and by the time I was done opening the living room windows, Katie had gone to the kitchen. I barely caught up with her as she was starting to scratch at the basement doorknob. The dead smell was really strong in the kitchen. I pulled her away and led her back to the living room. Nothing good was on and I didn't feel like doing homework, so we watched Jeopardy. I drifted off on the couch, and when I woke up, Katie was staring at me. It looked like she was smiling, but she was panting like she was out of breath. She was filthy though, like she'd been rolling around in dirt, but the door was still locked and I didn't think she could crawl out the window and back in. I didn't want to, but I took her hand and led her into the bathroom. I wasn't supposed to see her naked, and didn't want to, so I cleaned everywhere I could see dirt with her clothes on. She watched me the whole time, and when I was done, I was dog-tired. She really had had it all over. I left her in her room and made it into mine, shutting the door before crawling into bed. Sometime in the night, I heard Daddy come home, go to his room and drop one boot, then the other. I heard a creak from somewhere down the hall, and then there were other footsteps, slow, uneven ones. They got closer until there was a scratch on Daddy's door. "Lily?" I thought I heard Daddy say, but he never called Mama by her first name. It was the last thing he said, or at least the last thing I understood. There was a loud thump and then scuffling. Daddy started screaming, and I could hear stuff in their room being knocked over, broken. It went on for a good 5 minutes, but it didn't sound like Daddy was winning this time. I listened to what had to be Katie scratching at the doorknob. A long time later, those footsteps lumbered over to my door. A second hand started scratching and I stayed quiet, pulling the covers over my eyes. I heard another pair of footsteps stumble around in the hall. One of them must have bumped into the light switch, because there was a strip of light under my door from the hall. I could see the still shadows on the floor. Mama, Daddy and Katie were all waiting to take me away.